I will soon put my thoughts into writing. So, what would happen if there was a machine analyzing my brain signals when I started to write? Could it predict the words I'm thinking of? So, could it read my mind? Not exactly, but we're very close to that now. Because artificial intelligence has already started to crack the codes inside our brains. Meta has tested an artificial intelligence model that can predict what we are thinking. Brain to QWERTY, meaning from the brain to the keyboard. The model aims to convert brain signals into text. And it achieves this with an accuracy rate of 80%. So, can this artificial intelligence really read our thoughts? Or is it designed to produce the closest result to the thought we're having? I will explain this shortly. But first, let's understand how our brain works. The human brain is made up of billions of neurons, and every movement, every thought creates an electrical current. For example, when we want to say a word, the language centers of our brain, namely Broca's and Wernicke's areas, are activated first. These areas determine which word we will choose. Then the motor cortex controls our vocal cords, lips, and tongue. So, the brain, just like a conductor, manages different areas to turn our thoughts into words. So, what happens when we write? Writing is a bit more complex than speaking. Because it's not just about thinking of the words, we also have to control our hands and fingers. Motor cortex. So, the part of our brain that controls movements sends signals to our hands while we are writing, and our fingers press the right keys on the keyboard. All these activities in the brain can be measured with devices like EEG or MEG. With these measurements, we can see which part of our brain is active at what time. It's possible to detect which brain waves are activated while writing. However, brain signals are quite complex. Electrical activities are noisy and highly variable. When two different people think of the same word, the signals that form in their brains may not be exactly the same. In fact, even the brain signals of the same person are not consistent. Factors such as emotion, concentration level, and fatigue affect brain waves. So the brainwave signal that occurs when we say a word while we're tired is not the same as the signal when we say it while we're energized. So, how do we deal with such a complex system? How was the artificial intelligence tested by Meta able to solve it? I'm specifically using the word tested here, because this is not yet a technology that works independently. In the experiments conducted, brain signals were analyzed within a specific context, and the model tried to predict words using these signals. In a laboratory in Spain, 35 volunteers wrote predetermined text for hours. They used a keyboard while doing this. At that time, the brain activities of the volunteers were recorded by the MEC, which stands for magnetoencephalography. The measurements need to be as precise as possible because our brain signals are extremely weak. So, it can get lost instantly in a noisy environment. That's why this test was conducted in a very quiet laboratory environment. The goal was to establish a consistent match between the brain signals of the volunteers and the words being written. So, they taught the system the signals corresponding to specific words and letters. During the test, the model adapted to individual brain activities. Let's move on to the data processing process. For this, a three-stage structure was used. First, they activated a system that filters the signals emitted by the brain, convolutional neural network. This network detects patterns in brain signals. In other words, it finds out which brainwave activity corresponds to which letter. It's just like tuning an old radio frequency. So, it first organizes the signals. The model called the transformer model also processes the signals extracted by the convolutional neural network in a larger language context. For example, when someone starts to type the word apple, the model first identifies the letter A. Then, it predicts the word PPLE by tracking the brain signals. So the generated signals are interpreted in context. In the final stage of the process, a pre-trained language model was used. You can think of this like ChatGPT. In this model, the predicted words are evaluated in terms of grammar, context, and language rules. For example, if receive is written instead of receive, the model corrects it. So it works just like the autocorrect system on phones. This entire process allows for the production of meaningful text from brain signals. In these tests, not only MEG, but also EEG, which stands for electroencephalography, was used. However, while the accuracy rate of predictions made with EEG is about 33%, predictions made with MEG have reached up to 80%. The efforts to convert thought into writing are not new. In 2023, researchers at the University of Technology, Sydney, worked on a system that records the electrical activity of the brain through the scalp. Participants were fitted with a cap that records electrical brain activity. The obtained EEG recordings were then converted into text using an artificial intelligence model called D-Wave. So, what's the difference in Meta's artificial intelligence model? The accuracy rate has increased significantly. In the experiment in 2023, the accuracy was 40%, while the current model provides correct results at the rate of 80%. At that time, the system only used EEG, which had a weak signal resolution. Now, thanks to MEG, these signals can be processed much better. The previous model used classical machine learning methods, or simple artificial neural networks. Now, there is a three-stage artificial intelligence model. It no longer just tries to recognize words and letters one by one. It can predict sentences within context. But I want to emphasize this again and again. This is not mind reading, folks. We haven't reached that point yet. Here, artificial intelligence is trying to understand how thoughts are translated into words. So, it's progressing by learning how the signals in the brain match with words. For example, you woke up in the morning and you need coffee. The subconscious has kicked in. Then this desire became clearer. But it still hasn't been put into words. The language area of the brain was activated, and the thought of, I need to drink coffee, formed. Then, motor commands were sent, and it was translated into words as, I need to drink coffee. So, brain signals create a specific pattern of activity associated with words like coffee, drink, and should during this process. So there isn't a signal in the brain waves that says, I need to drink coffee. What is Brain 2 QWERTY doing? It's trying to analyze the complex signals generated by the brain to predict the most likely word. As I said, there is still no mind reading. Internal monologues or imagined things cannot be processed by the system at this time. Brain 2 QWERTY doesn't currently work with real-time fluency. It is processed after the sentence is completed. Also, since brain signals vary greatly from person to person, it's difficult to achieve the same level of success for everyone. Still, 80% is quite a high rate. The MEG device used weighs 500 kilograms and is worth $2 million. Okay, you found the money somehow, but since it's not a portable device, using it in daily life isn't really an option. So there are still certain limitations. However, technology is advancing so quickly that it is almost impossible to predict a year from now. For example, the MEG device is currently massive, but in the future it could become more portable and affordable. This way, writing from brainwaves could turn into a practical solution. Imagine a lightweight and wireless MEG device that you wear on your head. Now, I have a lot of questions in my mind. For example, could this technology merge with brain implants like Neuralink in the future? Can computers or phones be controlled with brain signals? No doubt about it. These studies could be a huge revolution for people with speech disabilities. That's the best part. There could be a direct way for individuals with paralysis or speech disorders to write using their brains. Remember, the famous scientist Stephen Hawking used advanced technology to communicate. However, of course, the system he used didn't directly detect brain signals, but rather light muscle movements. Let's move on to the potential risks. We shouldn't overlook the dark side of technology. I especially emphasize this in my videos, because unfortunately, these technologies are not always used with good intentions. Forget about mind reading. Even our phones and computers are constantly collecting user data, so our information may not always be safe. In the future, a system that can read brainwaves may also be able to access our thoughts. If one day this technology develops and reaches the capacity to read minds in real time, someone else may even be able to see our subconscious thoughts. Considering that Facebook has been involved in data scandals in the past, how will Meta use this technology? You've got quite a few question marks in your head, haven't you? Or what if hackers take control of this technology? I'm talking about a bigger threat than stealing credit card information. Can our brains be hacked? Or for example, could our thoughts be targeted by advertisements one day? Today, targeted ads are shown based on our search history, the links we click, the videos we watch, and the messages we write. If AI models that read brain signals become widespread, Even our thoughts could become a marketing tool. I don't want to scare you by diving into these Black Mirror-style dystopian scenarios, but more things are coming to my mind. So many things. For example, if a system can read the activities of our brain, it might also be possible, in the future, to send data to the brain through reverse engineering. What? So, can our brain signals be directly manipulated? Or could thought crimes emerge? Can a person be punished for having potentially dangerous thoughts, even if they haven't committed a crime? Many ethical issues like this and more could arise. Despite all these risks, technology will continue to advance. As always, it will push the boundaries. It will discover the unknown. But it will be us humans who determine how it will be used.